Today we are going to take a deep analysis of the dual endings, humanity's struggle between disillusionment and redemption of Great Expectation, overall narrative logic, thematic expression, and character development. Pip's life transitions, like a river guided by fate, have planted foreshadowing for the subsequent endings at every crucial juncture. The divergence between the dual endings is essentially a difference in the definition of Pip's growth endpoint. Is it the complete acceptance of disillusionment followed by relief, or the preservation of a glimmer of warm hope amidst regret? Is it confronting the cruelty of human nature and the unpredictability of reality, or offering readers emotional solace and redemption? This was not only a disagreement between Dickens and his close friend Edward Bulwer-Lytton, but also a core point of debate among literary critics and readers in later generations. This article will comprehensively analyze the dual endings of Great Expectations from 4 core dimensions. First, restructure the novel's core plot and Pip's character arc to lay the foundation for interpreting the endings. Second, detailedly compare the textual details, emotional tones, and core connotations of the 2 versions of the endings to clarify their essential differences. Third, deeply explore the underlying reasons for Dickens' revision of the ending, combining the social background of the Victorian era, the literary publishing environment, and Dickens' creative philosophy to analyze the struggle between realism and warmth. Fourth, from the perspective of literary criticism, comprehensively sort out the core viewpoints supporting the original and revised endings, and discuss the different impacts of the 2 endings on the novel's artistic integrity and thematic expression. Finally, combining the work's historical value and contemporary significance, interpret the enlightenment that the dual endings bring to our understanding of the true connotation of Great Expectations and the meaning of growth and redemption. This article will strive to be detailed and in-depth, supplementing a great deal of original text details, historical background, and literary criticism materials, ensuring that the total number of words is no less than 40,000, presenting readers with a comprehensive and in-depth analysis of the dual endings of Great Expectations Part 1, the core plot of Great Expectations and Pip's character arc, foundational chapter. As a typical Bildungsroman, the core charm of Great Expectations lies in its meticulous portrayal of the protagonist Pip's complete growth trajectory from childhood to adulthood. Pip's life is not smooth sailing but full of turns, struggles, and transformations. Every crucial plot not only drives the development of the story but also profoundly shapes his character, values, and life choices. These plots, like coordinates, mark Pip's journey from innocence to confusion, from vanity to clarity, and from betrayal to redemption, and also lay the groundwork for the emergence of the dual endings, for both the original tragic realism and the revised understated hope must align with Pip's character arc. Otherwise, the artistic integrity of the novel would be compromised. Therefore, before discussing the dual endings, we must first fully sort out Pip's life trajectory and character growth, and understand the psychological motivations and historical inevitability behind his every choice. Childhood background. The marshes, fear, and hidden kindness. Pip's childhood was spent in the countryside of Kent, England. Born into poverty, he was orphaned at an early age and raised by his irritable sister and kind-hearted brother-in-law, Joe Goggery. His childhood lacked warm family affection, a comfortable life, and even a sense of security. His only solace came from the care and companionship of his brother-in-law Joe. Joe, a simple blacksmith with little education, possessed the purest kindness and sincerity. He treated Pip as his own son, protecting this sensitive and vulnerable child in his own way, and became the only light in Pip's childhood. The novel opens with Pip weeping at the graves of his parents and siblings, a scene that not only sets the depressed and sorrowful tone of the early part of the novel, but also hints at the helpless foundation of Pip's life. It is at this moment that he encounters Magwitch, an escaped convict, a ragged, wounded man with fierce eyes. Magwitch threatens Pip's life, forcing him to steal food and a file from his home to satisfy his hunger and grind off the chains on his body. Young Pip, driven by fear and an instinct for self-preservation, has no choice but to obey the stranger's demands, secretly taking bread, pork, and a file from his home and delivering them to Magwitch. This incident, seemingly a chance encounter, is actually the first turning point in Pip's life and the beginning of the end of his childhood innocence. For Pip, the impact of this marsh encounter is profound and long-lasting. This impact is not only reflected in the superficial psychological shadow but also penetrates into his subconscious, becoming an invisible shackle that he can never shake off throughout his life. First and foremost, it is the inescapable psychological shadow and guilt. The education Pip received from an early age made him understand that theft is a sinful act, yet he had personally committed this sin out of fear. Although he was forced and his original intention was to protect himself, deep in his heart, he always believed that he had an indissoluble connection with crime. He was afraid of being discovered, afraid of being scolded by his sister, and afraid of disappointing Joe. This fear and guilt, like a heavy stone, weighed on his heart, depriving him of the carefree happiness that should belong to childhood. He became sensitive, inferior, and cautious, even waking up from nightmares related to it in his sleep. This psychological state laid the groundwork for his subsequent character distortion and value confusion. Second, it is the dual foreshadowing of fate, a dual foundation of material and spiritual aspects. Pip's act was essentially a kindness driven by fear. Although he was afraid of Magwitch, he also felt a trace of instinctive sympathy when he saw the man starving, cold, and covered in wounds. Although he was forced to steal, he did not choose to report Magwitch, but silently fulfilled the man's request. It was this insignificant kindness, wrapped in fear, that laid the material foundation for Pip's future great expectations without his knowledge. Years later, Magwitch made his fortune overseas, never forgetting the young boy who had helped him in his most desperate moment. He then secretly funded Pip, giving him the opportunity to go to London, receive a gentleman's education, and realize his gentleman's dream. From a spiritual perspective, this encounter also laid the groundwork for Pip's identity anxiety. Magwitch was an escaped convict, a man abandoned by society and excluded by the mainstream class. Pip's connection with him, even his help to him, made Pip subconsciously aware of the difference between birth and class. He himself was a humble country boy, and Magwitch was a criminal spurned by society. Both of them belonged to the underclass, both looked down upon by the upper class. This subconscious recognition made Pip secretly resent and reject his underclass identity, and also planted the seed for his later desire to escape the underclass and pursue an upper-class identity. It is worth noting that despite experiencing such trauma, Pip was essentially an innocent and kind child in his childhood. He relied on Joe, was grateful for Joe's care, and would silently accompany Joe when he was scolded by his sister. Although he was afraid of Magwitch, he would also secretly worry about the man's safety after sending him food and the file. At this time, he had not yet been corrupted by class prejudice and the desire for money. His kindness was pure, his fear was real, and his world had not yet been polluted by complex human nature and social rules. This innocence also became the core force of his later spiritual redemption. No matter how vain, selfish, or confused he became later, the innate kindness deep in his heart never completely disappeared, but was only covered by desire and vanity. Childhood Pip was like a seedling growing on barren soil, enduring the torment of wind and rain, his sister's irritability, poverty, fear, and guilt, while clinging tenaciously to the faint sunlight, Joe's care and his own innocence. Little did he know that this encounter on the marshes would completely change his life trajectory, leading him to experience a long struggle with money, class, love, and human nature in the years to come. Point 2. Class awakening. The illusion of Satis House and the seed of inferiority. If the marsh encounter was the first turning point in Pip's life, then entering Satis House was the second turning point, and the starting point of the distortion of his values. Satis House, this gloomy, decayed, and eerie manor, was like a huge cage, leading Pip into a false world and making him truly feel the gap between classes for the first time. Planting the seeds of inferiority and vanity, Pip was invited to Satis House by Miss Havisham. Miss Havisham was a wealthy old woman whose life was full of tragedy. On her wedding day, she was abandoned by her fiancé, and since then, she has been trapped in endless pain and resentment. To take revenge on men, she confined herself in Satis House, refusing to contact the outside world. Everything in her home remained as it was on her wedding day. Clocks stopped at 20 minutes to 9, a moldy wedding cake was placed on the dining table, the candles had long burned out, the curtains were drawn tight, and the entire manor was dim and silent, as if time had stood still here. Miss Havisham wore a faded wedding dress, with grey hair, a haggard face, and eyes full of resentment and indifference. Her existence was itself a symbol of tragedy. Pip's task at Satis House was to accompany Miss Havisham, talk with her, walk with her, and ease her loneliness and pain. But in reality, Miss Havisham's invitation to Pip was not only for companionship but also to use him as part of her revenge plan. She wanted to train Estella, the daughter she had adopted, through Pip, teaching Estella to be cold, cruel, and to use her beauty and arrogance to hurt the men who were attracted to her, thereby taking revenge on the fiancé who had abandoned her back then. It was at Satis House that Pip first met Estella. Estella was a beautiful, elegant, and arrogant girl with outstanding looks and good education, but she also had a cold, selfish, and cruel heart. She was Miss Havisham's tool for revenge, and from an early age, she was indoctrinated by Miss Havisham with the idea that all men are hypocritical and selfish and do not trust any man. Therefore, she was full of rejection and contempt for all men, especially Pip, who was of humble birth. Before meeting Estella, although Pip was dissatisfied with his living conditions, he did not have a strong sense of class. He was an apprentice blacksmith, learning to forge iron with Joe every day, leading a poor but peaceful life. He was accustomed to his humility, accepted his fate, and even had no great expectations for his future life. He thought he would be a blacksmith like Joe all his life, marry an ordinary country girl, and live a plain life. But Estella's appearance completely shattered his peace and made him feel the shame of humility for the first time. When Estella first met Pip, she unceremoniously mocked his birth, his clothes, and his hands. Looking at Pip's rough hands, she smiled and said, "Your hands are so rough, your shoes are so heavy, you are just a vulgar little blacksmith." Her words, like a sharp knife, stabbed deeply into Pip's heart. For the young Pip, this was the first time he had been mocked so directly and harshly, and also the first time he realized that poverty, lack of education, and humble birth were a shame, a label that would make him looked down upon and despised by others. This mockery planted the seed of inferiority in Pip's heart and ignited his avid desire for a gentleman's identity. He began to loathe his birth, his hands, and his life. He was no longer satisfied with being an apprentice blacksmith, no longer satisfied with living a poor life. He was determined to become a gentleman, a man with status, position, wealth, and education, a man worthy of Estella. He thought that as long as he became a gentleman, he could escape his humble identity, gain Estella's favor, and get rid of the contempt and mockery of others. But at this time, Pip's understanding of a gentleman was superficial and one-sided. He believed that a gentleman was someone who had wealth, dressed decently, and behaved elegantly, someone who could escape the life of the underclass, someone who could be accepted by the upper class. His motivation for pursuing a gentleman's identity was not to improve his personality or morality from the very beginning, but to satisfy his vanity and inferiority, his infatuation with Estella, and his desire to escape his underclass identity. This motivation destined his gentleman's dream to be a false illusion from the start. What he pursued was not true nobility, but false decency. What he longed for was not self-growth, but the recognition of others. During his time at Satis House, Pip was repeatedly mocked and teased by Estella, and repeatedly felt the humiliation brought by the gap between classes. But he did not choose to give up. On the contrary, he became more determined to become a gentleman. He began to secretly learn to read and write, began to imitate the behaviors of the upper class, and began to loathe everything around him. He loathed Joe's rusticity, loathed the poverty of the countryside, loathed the noise of the blacksmith shop, and even began to loathe the brother-in-law who had once accompanied and protected him. His heart began to become more and more vain, selfish, and deviated from his original self. Satis House was like a huge mirror, reflecting Pip's inner inferiority and vanity, as well as the decay and indifference of the upper class. Miss Havisham's resentment, Estella's coldness, and the silence and decay of the manor all subtly influenced Pip, making him gradually corrupted by class prejudice and lost in false illusions. He thought that as long as he left the countryside, left the blacksmith shop, and became a gentleman, he could have a happy life and win Estella's love. But he did not know that this pursuit based on vanity and inferiority would lead him into a deeper abyss. It is worth noting that although Pip had already begun to become vain and inferior at this time, the kindness deep in his heart had not yet completely disappeared. He would still feel sad silently after Estella mocked him. He would still feel sympathy when he saw Miss Havisham's tragedy. He would still feel a trace of guilt in his heart when he returned home and felt Joe's care. But this kindness, under the impact of vanity and inferiority, became more and more faint and difficult to detect. He was like a person walking in the fog, not knowing his direction, nor knowing what he was pursuing, but blindly moving forward towards the false goal of gentleman. 3. Confusion and degradation. The extravagance of London and the collapse of morality. The third turning point in Pip's life was receiving unexpected wealth and going to London to receive a gentleman's education. This incident made Pip's gentleman's dream seemingly come true, but it also made him completely fall into confusion and degradation, marking the beginning of his moral collapse. One day, the lawyer Jaggers suddenly came to Pip's hometown, bringing news that shocked Pip. He had a mysterious benefactor who was willing to bear all his expenses, send him to London to receive a gentleman's education, and make him a real gentleman. Jaggers did not tell Pip the identity of the benefactor, but only told him that the benefactor had one request. Before he became a gentleman, he could not inquire about any information about the benefactor, nor could he try to find the benefactor. This news was undoubtedly a great joy for Pip, who was determined to become a gentleman. He was instantly overwhelmed by great joy, and subconsciously thought that this mysterious benefactor must be Miss Havisham. In his opinion, Miss Havisham was wealthy and noble, and had a certain affection for him. Sending him to London to receive a gentleman's education was to make him worthy of Estella and to fulfill the love between him and Estella. This thought further strengthened his vanity and illusions, and made him more determined to become a gentleman. Thus, Pip bid farewell to his hometown, bid farewell to Joe and Biddy, and went to London with great longing. London, the capital of Britain at that time, was a city full of opportunities and temptations, as well as a city full of hypocrisy and decay. Here, Pip began his life as a gentleman. He lived in a luxurious apartment, wore decent clothes, attended various upper-class occasions, made various so-called gentleman friends, and received various gentlemanly educations, etiquette, music, painting, etc. He thought that this kind of life was the great expectations he had been longing for, the nobility and decency he desired, but in reality, the extravagance of London soon corrupted Pip's mind, making him completely lose himself. He began to be extravagant and wasteful, unambitious, no longer as diligent and simple as before, no longer cherishing the hard-won opportunity, but blindly pursuing material enjoyment and superficial decency. He spent money like water, buying expensive clothes, expensive furniture, holding grand banquets, making friends who only knew how to eat, drink, and play, and were hypocritical and cunning, such as Herbert Pocket, and even began to gamble and drink, completely abandoning his past living habits and moral principles. What was even more terrifying was that Pip's values began to be completely distorted. He began to betray his past and those who truly loved and cared for him. He loathed Joe's rusticity, thinking that Joe's arrival would make him lose face in front of his friends. Therefore, when Joe came to London to visit him, he acted extremely cold and impatient, even deliberately alienating Joe and refusing to let Joe appear in his social circle. He also alienated Biddy, the girl who had once accompanied him, encouraged him, and treated him sincerely, thinking that Biddy was of humble birth and not worthy of being his friend. He began to look down on the people of the underclass, thinking that they were vulgar and humble, not worthy of his attention and respect, and even forgot that he himself had come from the underclass and forgot the care and dedication that Joe had given him. At this time, Pip had completely become a slave to money and vanity. The gentleman's identity he pursued was nothing but superficial decency. His heart was still empty, inferior, and selfish. Although he had wealth, a decent life, and the so-called gentleman identity, he did not obtain true happiness. He lived an extravagant and muddled life every day, but his heart was full of anxiety and confusion. He did not know what he really wanted, did not know what his great expectations really were, and did not know what the meaning of his life was. During his time in London, Pip also tried to get close to Estella. He thought that now that he was a gentleman, he was worthy of Estella, and Estella would definitely accept his love. But he did not expect that Estella was still cold and contemptuous of him, still treating him as a vulgar underclass man. Estella married Bentley Drummle, a wealthy and powerful but cruel and selfish nobleman, to consolidate her social status and to continue hurting Pip. Estella's rejection and betrayal dealt a heavy blow to Pip. He finally realized that even if he became a gentleman, even if he had wealth and status, he still could not win Estella's love, nor could he get rid of his inner inferiority. But at this time, he was already deep in the mire and could not extricate himself. He had become accustomed to the extravagance of London, accustomed to the decent life of a gentleman, and was unwilling to return to the countryside, unwilling to be a blacksmith again, and unwilling to face his past. He could only continue to be extravagant and wasteful, continue to be muddled, and continue to sink in vanity and confusion. His moral bottom line had completely collapsed, and his soul had completely lost its way. At this stage, Pip was both pitiful and exasperating. He was pitiful because he was deceived by false illusions, spent his whole life chasing great expectations that did not belong to him, and finally lost himself and those who truly loved and cared for him. He was exasperating because he forgot his roots, forgot Joe's care, forgot the kindness in his heart, and became vain, selfish, cold, and ungrateful. But we cannot entirely blame Pip, because his confusion was not only his own fault but also a product of the times, the class solidification of the Victorian era, the hypocrisy and decay of the upper class, and the humility and helplessness of the underclass all subtly influenced Pip, making him gradually deviate from the right path in the process of pursuing his gentleman's dream. 4. The shocking truth. The return of the benefactor and the collapse of values. The fourth and most impactful turning point in Pip's life was the revelation of the truth about his benefactor, that his benefactor was not Miss Havisham, whom he had always thought, but Magwitch, the escaped convict he had helped on the marshes. This truth, like a bolt from the blue, completely shattered Pip's gentleman's dream, made his values completely collapse, forcing him to face his own hypocrisy and selfishness and embark on the path of spiritual redemption. While Pip was indulging in the extravagance of London and deep in vanity and confusion, Magwitch suddenly returned to London and appeared in front of Pip. At this time, Magwitch was no longer the ragged, fierce, and down-and-out escaped convict he had been back then. He had made his fortune overseas through improper means and become a wealthy man. But he never forgot Pip's help back then, never forgot the young boy who had given him a glimmer of warmth and kindness in his most desperate moment. Therefore, he risked being arrested and sentenced to death by the British government to return to London, just to see Pip in person, to see if the young boy he had funded had become a real gentleman. When Magwitch told Pip that he was his benefactor, Pip was completely stunned. He could not believe his ears, could not believe that his long-cherished great expectations were built on the money of an escaped convict, could not believe that the gentleman's identity he was so proud of was obtained with the hard-earned money of a criminal spurned by society. At that moment, all his pride, all his vanity, all his illusions, instantly turned to nothing, and his values completely collapsed. Pip's first reaction was disgust and fear. He loathed Magwitch's identity, loathed Magwitch's vulgarity, and loathed that his gentleman's dream was actually associated with such a criminal. He feared Magwitch's appearance, feared that Magwitch's identity would be exposed, which would affect his gentlemanly image and make him a laughingstock. He even wanted to get rid of Magwitch, deny his relationship with Magwitch, and continue to maintain his false gentlemanly decency, but Magwitch's sincerity and perseverance gradually moved Pip. Although Magwitch was an escaped convict, of humble birth, and had obtained wealth through improper means, he had the purest kindness and gratitude in his heart. He funded Pip not for reward or use, but simply to thank Pip for his help back then, and to let Pip escape his humble birth and live a better life. He regarded Pip as his own son, as his own hope, and he was willing to give everything for Pip, even willing to sacrifice his own life for Pip. In the process of getting along with Magwitch, Pip gradually overcame his disgust and fear, began to re-understand Magwitch, and began to see the humble but sincere humanity in Magwitch. He found that although Magwitch was vulgar and guilty, he was more sincere, kind, and grateful than the gentlemen of the upper class. Those upper-class gentlemen, on the surface, were decent and elegant, but in their hearts, they were hypocritical, selfish, cold, and cunning. They stopped at nothing for wealth and status, even at the expense of hurting others, while Magwitch, although living at the bottom of society and having made mistakes, always maintained the kindness and sincerity in his heart, and always knew how to be grateful and repay kindness. As he got to know Magwitch better and better, Pip's heart began to change. He began to reflect on his past, his pursuits, and his actions. He realized that the gentleman's dream he had been chasing was actually a false illusion. The wealth and status he had been pursuing were actually meaningless. The past he had been betraying and the people he had been hurting were the most precious things in his life. He began to feel guilty for his vanity, selfishness, and ungratefulness, began to regret alienating Joe and Biddy, and began to blame himself for his degradation and confusion in London. At this time, Pip finally began to awaken. He understood that a real gentleman is not about how much wealth, status, or decency he has, but about having a kind, sincere, grateful, and responsible heart. The real great expectations are not about escaping the underclass identity or gaining the recognition of the upper class, but about achieving self-growth, adhering to the morality and conscience in his heart, and cherishing those who truly love and care for him. To protect Magwitch and make up for his mistakes, Pip made a difficult but firm decision: to give up all the wealth given to him by Magwitch, give up his gentlemanly life in London, accompany Magwitch to flee, help Magwitch escape the pursuit of the British government, and go to a safe place. In this process, Pip experienced countless difficulties and dangers. He not only had to avoid the police's pursuit but also face various unknown challenges, but he never gave up and always adhered to his beliefs. In the process of accompanying Magwitch to flee, Pip gradually regained the kindness and sincerity in his heart, gradually learned to be grateful and take responsibility, and gradually got rid of the shackles of vanity and inferiority. He no longer cared about his identity and decency, no longer pursued wealth and status. He only wanted to protect Magwitch, make up for his mistakes, and regain the innocent and kind self he once was. His soul began to be redeemed, and his life began to return to the right track. However, fate did not favor Pip and Magwitch. Their escape plan was eventually discovered. Magwitch was arrested by the police and sentenced to death. Before Magwitch died, Pip accompanied him by his side and told Magwitch that he had become a real gentleman, a gentleman with a noble soul. After hearing these words, Magwitch closed his eyes peacefully, and his wish was finally fulfilled. Magwitch's death dealt a heavy blow to Pip, but it also made him completely complete his spiritual redemption. He gave up all his wealth, returned to his hometown, reverted to being a blacksmith, accompanied Joe, and made up for his past mistakes. He was no longer vain, selfish, or cold. He became sincere, kind, grateful, and responsible. He finally became a real gentleman, a gentleman with a noble soul, not a gentleman with only superficial decency. Pip's character arc reached its peak at this moment. From an innocent and kind country boy, to a vain, selfish, and lost false gentleman, and then to a sincere, kind, grateful, and noble-souled real gentleman, he experienced a long and difficult growth process, and also experienced a profound baptism of human nature, morality, and growth. This growth process of Pip also laid a solid foundation for the emergence of the dual endings of Great Expectations, both the original tragic realism and the revised Understated hope must align with Pip's complete character arc and reflect Pip's growth and redemption Part 2. Textual comparison and core connotation of the dual endings of Great Expectations. The dual endings of Great Expectations are the most controversial part of the novel and an important embodiment of its literary value. The two versions of the endings have distinct styles in textual details, emotional tones, and core connotations, representing two different creative philosophies of Dickens. The original tragic realism emphasizes the cost of growth and the unpredictability of reality. The revised understated hope focuses on emotional solace and human redemption. To deeply understand the controversy of the dual endings, we first need to make a detailed textual comparison of the two versions of the endings, clarify their specific differences, and then explore their underlying core connotations. It should be noted that Great Expectations was initially published in serial form in the magazine all the year round, running for 19 installments from December 1860 to August 1861. After the serialization ended, Dickens revised the novel and published it as a single volume in 1862. The most important revision was the adjustment of the ending, changing the original tragic and realistic ending to the understated hopeful ending that we see in most translations today. Both versions of the ending have their unique value and significance, and have been supported and recognized by different readers and literary critics in later generations. The original ending, tragic realistic version, relief of passing by, irreversible regret. The original ending, also known as the first edition ending or tragic ending, is the ending originally created by Dickens and the one he initially insisted on. The core tone of this ending is realism and regret, emphasizing the irreversible cost of growth, and also reflecting Dickens' creative philosophy of literary realism, not deliberately beautifying reality, not pursuing false perfection, but facing the cruelty of human nature and the unpredictability of reality head-on. Textual details of the original ending, collated according to Dickens' original manuscript and combined with classic translations many years later, after experiencing Magwitch's death, the loss of wealth, and spiritual redemption, Pip returned to London. At this time, he was no longer the vain, selfish, and lost false gentleman he had been back then, but a mature, steady, sincere, and kind man. He no longer pursued wealth and status, no longer cared about identity and decency, but lived a plain and simple life, earning a living with his own hands, making up for his past mistakes. He re-established a deep relationship with Jo and Biddy, accompanied them, and enjoyed the warmth and happiness brought by ordinary life. One day, Pip accidentally met Estella on the streets of London. At this time, Estella had gone through a painful marriage. Her husband, Bentley Drummle, that cruel and selfish nobleman, had died. Having experienced the pain of marriage and the hardships of life, Estella was no longer the arrogant, cold, and cruel girl she had been back then. She became haggard and vicissitudes, and also became gentle and humble. She no longer had the beauty and pride of the past, nor the coldness and contempt of the past. She was just an ordinary woman who had been tortured by fate and smoothed by life. When the two met on the street, there was no intense emotional outburst, no joy of reunion after a long separation, nor entanglement of love and hatred, only a calm and faint relief. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with complex emotions, memories, regrets, guilt, and relief. They did not say much, but calmly reached out and shook hands. That handshake had no temperature of love, no ambiguous feelings, only a tacit understanding and reconciliation. After going through vicissitudes, after shaking hands, they did not stay, but turned around and walked in different directions, passing by each other and never looking back. Pip stood where he was, watching Estella's fading figure. Although there was still a trace of ripples and regret in his heart, he was no longer sad or persistent. He understood that the era full of illusions and obsessions was completely over. He understood that the fate between him and Estella had long come to an end in the passage of time and in their respective growth and transformation. He understood that some regrets and misses were the inevitable path of growth, an irreversible reality. Pip turned around and continued walking in his own direction, his steps firm and calm. He knew that there would still be difficulties and challenges in the future life, but he was no longer afraid, because he had regained the kindness and sincerity in his heart, had learned to let go and be relieved, and had understood that the real great expectations were not about how much he gained, but about how much he let go and cherished. The core connotation of the original ending can be interpreted from the following three aspects. First, it emphasizes the cost of growth, regret and irreversibility. Pip's life was spent chasing a false gentleman's dream and clinging to an impossible love. He paid a heavy price for this, betraying his relatives and friends, losing himself, experiencing the gain and loss of wealth, and enduring the betrayal of human nature. In the end, although he achieved spiritual redemption and regained the kindness and sincerity in his heart, he also lost a lot. He lost the love between him and Estella, lost the innocence and happiness of the past, and left irreparable regrets. This regret is not accidental, but inevitable for growth. Growth is a process of constant loss, letting go, and relief. In the process of growing up, we will always miss some people and things, and always leave some regrets. These regrets are irreversible and the inevitable cost of growth. Second, it embodies the spirit of literary realism, facing the unpredictability of reality and the cruelty of human nature head-on. In the original ending, Dickens did not deliberately beautify reality, nor did he give Pip a happy ending of winning the beauty's hand. Instead, he faced the unpredictability of reality and the cruelty of human nature head-on. Estella did not completely change because of the pain of marriage. She was still a person tortured by fate, and there was no possibility of her getting back together with Pip even after going through vicissitudes. This ending is more in line with the logic of reality. A woman who was raised in a distorted way and never really loved others would not suddenly become a gentle partner because of a failed marriage. A person who has experienced countless betrayals and injuries would not easily forgive those who have hurt him, let alone easily pick up the obsessions of the past. With this realistic ending, Dickens tells readers, life is not a fairy tale. There are not so many perfections and miracles. More often, there are regrets and unpredictability, more struggles and redemption. Third, it highlights Pip's complete growth and relief. In the original ending, Pip's growth is ultimately reflected in letting go. He let go of his obsession with Estella, let go of his obsession with the gentleman's dream, let go of the guilt and regret for the past, and truly achieved relief. He no longer needed to prove his value by possessing Estella, no longer needed to gain the recognition of others through wealth and status. He was able to calmly accept his past, calmly face his regrets, and calmly live a plain and simple life. This letting go is not compromise or giving up, but a real maturity, a real growth. He finally understood that the real self-worth lies not in the recognition of others, but in the peace and tranquility of the heart. The real great expectations lie not in how much he gains, but in how much he lets go and cherishes. The emotional tone of the original ending is calm, indifferent, with a faint regret. There is no intense emotional conflict, no false perfection, only relief and calm after going through vicissitudes. Although this ending makes many readers feel regret and cruelty, it is more in line with the disillusionment theme of the entire novel Great Expectations. Pip's great expectations were a false illusion from the start, a dream woven by money, class, and love. The original ending is the complete awakening from this dream, the beginning of Pip's emergence from the illusion and facing reality head-on. Point 2. The revised ending, understated, hopeful version, reunion in ruins, unspoken perfection. The revised ending, also known as the single-volume ending or hopeful ending, is the ending formed by Dickens after revising the original ending at the persuasion of his friend Edward Bulwer-Lytton. The core tone of this ending is understatement and hope, focusing on emotional solace and human redemption, trying to leave readers with a warm expectation, and also reflecting Dickens' compromise and consideration for readers' emotional needs. Textual details of the revised ending, the version adopted by most translations today, combined with Dickens' revised manuscript many years later. After experiencing a series of changes and redemption, Pip returned to his hometown. He first returned to Joe and Biddy, made up for his past mistakes, re-established a deep relationship with them, and enjoyed the warmth and happiness brought by ordinary life. Later, he went to Satis house alone, that manor that once led him into illusions and planted the seed of inferiority in him, which was now in ruins. The once gloomy, decayed, and silent manor was now only a pile of ruins, overgrown with weeds, as if telling the past tragedies and vicissitudes. Pip stood on the ruins of Satis house, his heart full of emotions. He thought of his experiences here in his childhood, thought of Miss Havisham's tragedy, thought of Estella's coldness and arrogance, and thought of his own past vanity and confusion. Those past experiences that had made him suffer, persist, and lose himself had now become memories, all becoming indifferent. At that moment, he saw a familiar figure, Estella. At this time, Estella was no longer the arrogant, cold, and cruel girl she had been back then, nor the haggard and vicissitudes ordinary woman in the original ending. She had gone through the pain of marriage and the hardships of life, becoming gentle, humble, mature, and steady. Her appearance was no longer as stunning as it once was, but her eyes were filled with a trace of tenderness, vicissitudes, and relief. She also came to the ruins of Satis house, seemingly wanting to bid farewell to the past pain and obsessions here. The two reunited in the ruins. There was no intense emotional outburst, no joy of reunion after a long separation, only a calm and gentle tacit understanding. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with complex emotions, memories, guilt, relief, and a trace of imperceptible warmth. They did not say much, but stood quietly on the ruins, looking at each other, as if telling each other their experiences and changes over the years. Estella looked at Pip and said softly, "Pip, I have changed. I am no longer the cold and cruel girl I used to be. Over the years, I have experienced a lot and understood a lot. I know that I hurt you back then, and I am very guilty." Pip looked at Estella and also said softly, "I have changed too. I am no longer the vain and selfish boy I used to be. I have forgiven you, and I have also forgiven my past self." The two stood side by side on the ruins, watching the sunrise in the distance. The morning mist gradually dispersed, and the sun shone on them, warm and bright. Pip looked at Estella beside him, and a faint warmth surged in his heart. He knew that the past pain was gone, the past obsessions were let go, and both of them had become better versions of themselves. The last sentence of the novel is Pip's inner monologue, "I saw no shadow of another parting from her." This ending does not clearly state whether Pip and Estella finally got married, nor does it clearly state what their future life will be like. Instead, it leaves a vague and understated ending, leaving readers with infinite room for imagination. The core connotation of the revised ending can be interpreted from the following three aspects. First, it provides readers with emotional solace and hope. In the revised ending, Dickens did not continue the cruelty and regret of the original ending, but left readers with a warm hope. Pip and Estella's reunion in the ruins, their mutual forgiveness and relief, is in itself a kind of emotional solace. The sentence "I saw no shadow of another parting from her" can be interpreted either as the two finally getting married and achieving reconciliation after a broken mirror, or as the two finally letting go of their past obsessions, reconciling as friends, and living their own lives in peace, no longer having the pain of separation. This vague and understated ending not only avoids the cruelty and regret of the original ending but also gives readers infinite room for imagination, allowing readers to feel the pain of growth and redemption while also feeling a warm hope. Second, it emphasizes the possibility of human redemption and growth. The revised ending further highlights the possibility of human redemption and growth. Although Estella was once cold and cruel and had hurt Pip, after experiencing the pain of marriage and the hardships of life, she finally achieved self-redemption, becoming gentle, humble, and knowing how to reflect and feel guilty. Although Pip was once vain, selfish, and lost, after experiencing the gain and loss of wealth and the betrayal of human nature, he also achieved self-redemption, becoming sincere, kind, and knowing how to forgive and let go. The growth and redemption of the two prove the complexity of human nature. Human nature is not immutable. Even if one has made mistakes or lost oneself in the past, as long as one can wake up in time and adhere to the kindness and conscience in one's heart, one can definitely achieve self-redemption and become a better version of oneself. Third, it deepens the theme of redemption and weakens the color of disillusionment. If the core of the original ending is disillusionment, Pip's gentleman's dream is completely shattered, his love with Estella is completely missed, leaving irreparable regrets. Then the core of the revised ending is redemption. Both Pip and Estella have achieved self-redemption, let go of their past obsessions, and found peace and tranquility in their hearts. The revised ending weakens the color of disillusionment in the original ending and strengthens the theme of redemption, making readers feel that no matter how much pain and setbacks they experience, no matter how many betrayals and injuries they suffer, as long as they can adhere to the kindness and conscience in their hearts and learn to forgive and let go, they can definitely obtain redemption and have their own great expectations. The emotional tone of the revised ending is warm, understated, with a faint hope. There is no cruelty and regret of the original ending, only reconciliation and warmth after going through vicissitudes. Although this ending is regarded by some literary critics as forced perfection and slightly cliched, it is more in line with the aesthetic expectations of Victorian readers and can better provide readers with emotional solace and strength. Point 3. The core differences between the dual endings, narrative version. To more clearly present the differences between the two versions of the endings, we can describe their core distinctions in a narrative way, covering all key dimensions of the original comparison. In terms of the reunion scene, the original tragic and realistic ending features an accidental encounter between Pip and Estella on the streets of London, a common and ordinary scene with no special symbolic meaning. In contrast, the revised, understated and hopeful ending arranges their reunion in the ruins of Satis House, where the ruins symbolize the destruction of their past pains and illusions, as well as the possibility of rebirth. Regarding Estella's state at the time of reunion, in the original ending, she is haggard and full of vicissitudes after going through a painful marriage. After her husband Bentley Drummle's death, she remarries an ordinary doctor and becomes an ordinary woman who has been smoothed by life. In the revised ending, Estella becomes gentle, humble, and mature after experiencing hardships, achieving self-redemption, and there is no clear information about her remarriage, focusing more on her inner transformation rather than her marital status. In terms of the interaction between Pip and Estella, the original ending is extremely calm and even indifferent. The two only shake hands calmly, do not exchange more words, and then turn around and walk in different directions, passing by each other without looking back, with no obvious emotional expression. The revised ending, however, is filled with subtle warmth. They make eye contact, have a gentle dialogue, express mutual forgiveness, and stand side by side watching the sunrise, conveying a faint sense of warmth and tacit understanding. In terms of the expression of the ending, the original ending focuses on Pip's relief and the irreversibility of regret. Pip watches Estella's fading figure, feels calm and relieved in his heart, and clearly accepts the fact that their fate has ended, emphasizing that some regrets in growth are inevitable and cannot be reversed. The revised ending is vague and understated, ending with Pip's inner monologue, "I saw no shadow of another parting from her," which does not clearly state whether the two will get married, but leaves infinite room for imagination, conveying a warm hope for the future. The emotional tones of the two endings are also distinctly different. The original ending is calm, indifferent, with a touch of cruelty and regret, focusing on the helplessness of reality and the heaviness of growth. The revised ending is warm, gentle, and understated, with a faint hope, focusing on emotional solace and the beauty of human nature. In terms of core connotation, the original ending emphasizes the cost of growth, facing the unpredictability of reality and the cruelty of human nature head-on, and highlights the wisdom of letting go as the ultimate embodiment of Pip's growth. The revised ending, on the other hand, emphasizes the possibility of human redemption and growth, provides emotional solace for readers, highlights the power of forgiveness, and weakens the sense of disillusionment in the original ending, strengthening the theme of redemption. From the perspective of thematic focus, the original ending centers on disillusionment, focusing on breaking Pip's false illusions about the gentleman's dream and love, and guiding readers to face the truth of reality squarely. The revised ending focuses on redemption, emphasizing the self-growth and transformation of both Pip and Estella, and conveying warm hope for human nature and the future. Finally, in terms of readers' feelings, the original ending leaves readers with a sense of regret and cruelty, making people feel the helplessness of reality and the heaviness of growth, and triggering in-depth thinking about life and growth. The revised ending brings readers warmth and comfort, making people feel the beauty of human nature and the power of redemption, and leaving a warm expectation for the future. In terms of creative philosophy, the original ending embodies Dickens' adherence to literary realism, refusing to beautify reality or pursue false perfection, and focusing on presenting the true cruelty and unpredictability of life. The revised ending reflects Dickens' compromise and consideration for the aesthetic expectations of Victorian readers, while also retaining the theme of redemption, trying to balance literary realism and emotional solace, leaving readers with warm hope while exploring the complexity of human nature. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe my channel for listening more stories.